I remember Valora before the war. It was a world of blue oceans, silver mountains, and ancient cities built by a species that once believed an oath was worth dying for. We were the Arini, and for centuries our fleet had guarded the frontier. We were not the oldest civilization in the galaxy, nor the strongest, but we had one reputation even our enemies respected. We never abandoned our allies. By the time I commanded Stonebridge, that reputation was mostly history. Our fleet had been reduced to a fraction of its former strength. Our ships were old, our arsenals were nearly empty, and the Galactic Council had grown accustomed to ignoring us. Then the Krell came. I was in the command center when the first warning appeared. Hundreds of enemy vessels had entered the system. Within minutes, their fleet surrounded Valora. They demanded our energy resources and the surrender of our population. I refused. The attack began before the transmission had fully ended. Orbital stations disappeared one after another. Our defensive ships fought until their reactors failed. By nightfall, the Krell had established a blockade, and their troops were preparing to land. I sent an emergency appeal to the Galactic Council. Their answer arrived 6 hours later. They called it an internal dispute. They would not intervene. I remember reading those words while artillery shook the walls of Stonebridge. For the first time, I understood that we were alone. 3 days later, the Krell reached the city. Then, during the worst night of the battle, an abandoned communications terminal suddenly activated. Static filled the screen. Then 2 words appeared. We remember. I assumed it was a malfunction. I was wrong. I was still staring at the dead terminal when Lieutenant Merrick entered the command center. "Commander, the eastern line is collapsing." I looked at the screen again. The message was gone. Only the ordinary tactical display remained, showing red Krell markers advancing towards Stonebridge. "Run a diagnostic on that terminal," I ordered. We already did. And? Nothing. It has no power source. That answer stayed with me. An hour later, the Krell began their final assault. Their transports descended through the clouds while our remaining guns fired until their barrels overheated. I watched from the command balcony as thousands of Krell soldiers moved toward the city. We had perhaps 12,000 defenders left. The Krell had nearly 80,000. There would be no miracle. I contacted every surviving unit and gave the same order. Hold. Not because we expected victory. Because every minute we survived was another minute in which civilians could reach the underground shelters. Stonebridge had been designed for siege. Beneath its oldest districts ran kilometers of tunnels, originally built during wars so ancient that their records were considered archaeological documents. Now they became our last refuge. At 0310, the western wall fell. At 0342, the Krell entered the outer districts. At 0417, we lost contact with the Northern Battalion. At 0430, I received another transmission from the Galactic Council. Their position had not changed. No intervention, no fleet, no assistance. I shut the channel. Then the lights in the command center flickered. The same abandoned terminal came alive. This time there was no static, no warning, only a single line. "We remember." Beneath it appeared another. 32 years. I stopped breathing for a moment. 32 years earlier, Valora had sent its fleet across the frontier to defend a young species called humanity. Earth had been under attack by the Krell. Our ships had gone anyway. At the time, nobody had questioned the decision. That was what Valora did. We protected those who needed us. I had been a junior officer then. I remembered the reports. Hundreds of Arini sailors had died defending Earth. Humanity had thanked us. Then they disappeared from galactic affairs. For 32 years, we heard almost nothing from them. I looked at the message again. A final line appeared. "We did not forget." Then the terminal went dark. Outside, the Krell guns began firing again. This time, I wondered if the message had been a malfunction. I no longer believed it. I did not sleep that night. Stonebridge was too loud for sleep anyway. Every few minutes, another explosion rolled through the underground command center. Dust fell from the ceiling. Emergency lights painted the corridors red. Somewhere above us, the Krell were advancing street by street. At 0612, our Western Defense Network disappeared. At 0628, the Southern Districts stopped responding. At 0641, I received the report I had been expecting. Commander, they have reached the inner perimeter. I closed my eyes. For 32 years, Valora had remembered the humans as a distant debt already paid. We had saved them because that was what we did. We never expected repayment. Now I wondered whether they remembered us at all. Then every communications terminal in Stonebridge activated simultaneously. The entire command center froze. There was no alarm, no warning. Every screen displayed the same message. Valoran Diplomatic Channel, verified. Merrick stared at me. Commander, I see it. A second line appeared. Authentication. Human. The room became completely silent. Then a transmission opened. A human voice spoke through the speakers. Calm. Male. Almost emotionless. Valora. Only one word. I stepped toward the console. This is Commander Evan Carter of the Valoran Defense Forces. Identify yourself. There was a brief pause. Captain Jake Miller, United Earth Defense Fleet. I felt something tighten in my chest. The name meant nothing to me. The fleet designation did. Where are you? Another pause. Outside your system. I looked at the tactical display. There was nothing there. No ships. No signals. Nothing. You have no ships on our sensors. We know. Merrick looked at me. I could see the question in his eyes. How? I asked it for him. What do you want? The human answer was immediate. You sent a fleet when Earth needed you. I said nothing. Miller continued. We recorded every ship you lost. The command center seemed colder. Captain, I said carefully, that was 32 years ago. I know. Another pause. Then his voice became even quieter. We remember. The transmission ended. No threat followed. No demand. No declaration of war. Outside, the Krell continued advancing. Then the tactical display flickered. One unidentified contact appeared beyond the outer moon. Then another. Then 10. Then hundreds. Merrick whispered, Commander. I watched the contacts multiply. For the first time since the invasion began, I felt something other than fear. I felt hope. The first human contact disappeared from our sensors almost as quickly as it had appeared. Then the tactical display changed. 100 contacts became 300. 300 became 700. The Krell had noticed them too. Their orbital formation shifted almost immediately. Ships that had been preparing to strike Stonebridge turned toward the empty darkness beyond the moon. I watched the Krell commander react through the intercepted channel. For the first time since the invasion began, he looked uncertain. Commander, Merrick said, we are detecting hyperspace distortions. Where? Everywhere. The answer made no sense. Then the stars moved, not physically. The darkness between them seemed to fold inward, as if space itself had become a sheet being pulled through invisible hands. Hundreds of ships emerged. They did not arrive in formation. They appeared at precise intervals, surrounding the Krell fleet from every direction. Their hulls were dark, angular, and unfamiliar. No council registry recognized them. No Krell database identified them. Then the largest human vessel appeared above Valora. It was enormous, far larger than anything Earth had supposedly possessed 32 years earlier. Its weapons remained silent, its engines powered down. It simply hovered there, between the planet and the Krell fleet. A transmission reached every military channel. Captain Jake Miller appeared on the screen. He looked younger than I expected. His uniform was plain. There were no medals covering his chest. No ceremonial symbols. Only a small Valoran emblem was fixed beside his name. I recognized it immediately. It was the symbol carried by the fleet that had defended Earth. Miller looked directly into the camera. Commander Carter. I straightened. Captain, we have arrived. I looked toward the tactical display. The human fleet stretched across the entire orbital grid. How many ships? I asked. Miller paused. Enough. That was all he said. Behind him, Another officer approached and whispered something. Miller listened. Then he looked back at me. The Krell are requesting communication. I almost smiled. Will you answer them? Yes. Why? Miller's expression did not change. Because they should know why we came. The transmission closed. A moment later, every Krell vessel received the human message. It contained only 6 words. You attacked the wrong world. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the Krell fleet opened fire. The humans did not fire back. They waited, and I suddenly understood something. They had not come to rescue us from a battle. They had come prepared to end it. The Krell opened fire first. Thousands of weapons filled the darkness around Valora. From the surface, it looked like a second sunrise had appeared in orbit. I expected the human fleet to answer. It did not. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then the Krell weapons stopped. Not because they had ceased firing. Because they were gone. Every projectile that had crossed the human defensive perimeter had vanished. The tactical display showed no explosions. No interceptors. No missiles. Just empty space. Merrick stared at his console. What did they do? I don't know. Then the human fleet moved. Not forward. Sideways. The ships separated with such precision that I initially thought our tactical system had malfunctioned. Hundreds of vessels became thousands of smaller formations, each moving independently while remaining perfectly coordinated. The Krell tried to respond. Their fleet turned toward the nearest human group. That group disappeared. A second later, it appeared behind the Krell formation. Then another. Then another. The humans were not fighting the Krell fleet as a single force. They were dismantling it. Kinetic projectiles struck Krell engines from distances our weapons officers considered impossible. Missiles appeared from directions that made no tactical sense. Human ships accelerated, stopped, and changed direction with movements that should have destroyed their crews. But they did not slow down. They did not hesitate. They simply executed their plan. Within 6 minutes, the first Krell cruiser broke formation. Then 10 more. Then hundreds. I watched their communications channels collapse into panic. Commander, Merrick whispered, they retreating. I looked again. He was right. The Krell Dominion had invaded Valora with overwhelming numbers. Now they were running. A new transmission appeared. Captain Miller. Commander Carter. Yes, your ground forces are still engaged. I looked toward the eastern districts. Yes, we sending assistance. What kind? There was a pause. Marines. I expected transport ships. Instead, thousands of objects appeared above the city. They were small, fast, and falling directly toward the battlefield. I watched the first human landing capsule enter the atmosphere without slowing. It struck the ground like a meteor. The capsule split open. Human soldiers stepped out. They were already armed, already moving, and they were coming toward us. The first human capsule struck the ground less than 200 meters from my position. It hit hard enough to throw dust across the street. For 1 second, nothing moved. Then the capsule opened. 6 humans stepped out. They wore dark armor unlike anything in our arsenal. No bright markings, no banners. Their weapons were compact, unfamiliar, and already aimed toward the Krell positions. The first human looked at me. Commander Carter? Yes, Captain Miller sent us. He pointed toward the eastern avenue. Your line is collapsing there. I looked past him. He was right. Krell infantry were advancing through the smoke. How many of you are there? He glanced upward. More capsules were falling. Hundreds. Enough. The word made me remember Miller. Enough. The humans moved. They did not shout. They did not celebrate. They simply advanced. The first Krell soldiers opened fire. The humans dropped to one knee and answered with controlled bursts of kinetic rounds. Krell armor stopped the first impacts. The next shots struck exactly where the first had damaged the plating. The Krell fell. Another group charged from a side street. A human soldier threw something small. It landed. A flash. The Krell stumbled, blinded. The humans passed them without wasting ammunition. I had fought beside many species during my career. I had never seen soldiers move like that. There was no anger in them. No hatred. No visible excitement. Only purpose. Commander, Merrick said over the radio. They moving toward the western district. Why? A human officer beside me answered. They cutting the Krell advance routes. He pointed toward the map displayed on my wrist. They are in trying to hold the city. I studied the markings. The humans were creating corridors, escape routes, civilian routes. Then I understood. They were not replacing our army. They were giving it room to breathe. For the first time in 3 days, our defenders began advancing instead of retreating. The Krell noticed. Their lines started breaking. I turned toward the human officer. Why are you helping us? He looked at me as though the answer should have been obvious. You saved Earth. That was 32 years ago. He checked his weapon. We know. Then he looked toward the sky. And we remember every ship that didn't come home. By midday, the battle had changed. Stonebridge was still burning, but the Krell no longer controlled the streets. Human Marines had established positions across the eastern districts, while Valoran soldiers pushed forward behind them. For the first time since the invasion began, we were taking ground. I moved with the advancing units through a street filled with smoke and shattered vehicles. Human soldiers passed me without looking away from their sectors. They communicated with hand signals and brief words, conserving every movement. One of them stopped beside a destroyed building. Commander, I approached. He pointed toward the ruins. 3 Krell underneath. Our engineers had not detected them. The Marine raised 2 fingers. 2 soldiers moved forward. A moment later, 3 controlled shots echoed beneath the rubble. Silence followed. Clear, he said. I stared at him. How did you know? He looked at the damaged structure. Footprints. That answer stayed with me. The humans noticed everything. They studied the ground, the walls, the smoke, the direction of the wind. They treated every battlefield as information. Then the Krell counterattacked. Their armor columns emerged from the northern district, supported by heavy artillery. Our defenders began falling back. I ordered the withdrawal. The human officer beside me shook his head. No. I looked at him. What? He pointed toward the rooftops. Human marksmen were already there. Then the artillery stopped. Not gradually. All at once. A series of explosions appeared behind the Krell formation. Their ammunition carriers were burning. Their command vehicles followed. Their communications collapsed. The Krell tanks suddenly had no orders. Then human missiles struck them from 3 directions. The entire counterattack lasted less than 4 minutes. When it ended, the street was quiet again. I looked toward the sky. The human fleet still hung above Valora. Hundreds of ships, silent, waiting. Merrick approached me. Commander, they intercepted another Krell transmission. From their command? Yes. What are they saying? He hesitated. They asking who the humans are. I looked at the burning city around us. Then at the soldiers standing beside me. Tell them, I said, they are the people we waited 32 years to hear from. Merrick nodded, but before he could transmit, another officer shouted from the command channel. Commander, Krell fleet signatures approaching Stonebridge. I turned toward the sky. The battle was not over. The Krell were bringing something larger. The sky above Stonebridge darkened. At first I thought it was smoke. Then the tactical officer shouted. Multiple heavy vessels entering the atmosphere. I looked up. The Krell had brought their largest weapon. It descended through the clouds like a moving mountain, surrounded by dozens of escort ships. Its hull was covered in armored plates, and 4 enormous engines burned beneath it. I knew the design. Every military officer in the galaxy knew it. The Planet Breaker, a siege machine built for one purpose: destroying fortified cities from orbit. Stonebridge had survived bombardments before. It would not survive that. Can we hit it? I asked. The human officer beside me studied the display. Not from orbit. Why? Too much energy. If we destroy it above the city, the debris will kill thousands. I looked at him. Then what do you suggest? He looked toward the underground map of Stonebridge. Where are the old tunnels? I pointed. everywhere beneath the Eastern District. Most were sealed decades ago. Not all. No. He looked at me. Take us there. Within minutes, I was moving underground with 12 human Marines. The tunnels were narrow and ancient. Dust covered the walls. In some places, roots had broken through the ceiling. We moved without lights whenever possible. Above us, the planet breaker began charging. The entire tunnel shook. I felt the vibration through my boots. How long? I asked. The Marine beside me checked his device. 8 minutes. We reached the old maintenance chamber. I stopped. This passage leads beneath the Krell position. Good. The human officer removed a small case from his pack. Inside were explosives. Not ordinary explosives. Even before he armed them, I could feel the weight of what they carried. What happens if this fails? I asked. He looked at me. It won. There was no confidence in his voice. Only certainty. We moved deeper. At the end of the tunnel, we found the Krell machine directly above us. Its foundations reached through the rock. The planet breaker began firing. Stonebridge shook. The humans placed the charges. I watched the timer begin counting down. 30 seconds. 20. 10. The Marine captain looked at me. Commander, when this detonates, run. I almost laughed. Instead, I asked him the only question that mattered. Will it stop the weapon? He looked upward. Yes. 3 seconds remained. Then the tunnel disappeared in white light. When I opened my eyes, I could not hear anything. For several seconds, I thought I was dead. Then the ringing began. I pushed myself upright. Dust filled the tunnel. Emergency lights flickered along the walls, and somewhere ahead, a human Marine was pulling another soldier from beneath fallen stone. Commander, I'm alive. Good. The Marine checked his weapon, then looked upward. Planet breaker? Gone. I stood. The chamber had partially collapsed, but the tunnel remained intact. Above us, there was no longer the deep mechanical vibration of the siege weapon. The humans had done it. We climbed toward the surface. When I emerged, Stonebridge was still standing. Barely. The planet breaker had collapsed into the district, its massive structure split open and burning. Krell soldiers were running in every direction. Their greatest weapon was gone, and the human fleet was waiting. Captain Miller contacted me before I could reach the command post. Commander Carter. Captain, your city is secure. I looked toward the northern horizon. Thousands of Krell ships were retreating. Not yet, I said. Their fleet is still inside the system. We know. Can you destroy them? A pause. Yes. I waited for the order that I knew would come. It did not. Instead, Miller asked, do you want us to? I looked across Stonebridge. The streets were filled with wounded soldiers. Civilians were emerging from shelters. Fires burned in buildings that had stood for centuries. I understood what he was asking. The humans could finish the war. They could pursue the Krell beyond Valora and destroy everything they had built. But they were waiting for our decision. No, I said. Miller nodded. Understood. Then the human fleet moved. Not toward the fleeing Krell. It moved between them and Valora. A wall of warships. A warning. The Krell understood. Their remaining vessels accelerated away. Within an hour, the last enemy ship disappeared from our system. Stonebridge had survived. I stood among the ruins and watched the human fleet hanging above us. For 32 years, I had believed we were the ones who had saved Earth. Now I understood. We had only started a debt. Humanity had spent 32 years preparing to repay it. The war ended faster than anyone expected. By the following morning, the last Krell transports had crossed the outer boundary of the system. Human ships remained behind, forming a silent defensive ring around Valora. They did not pursue the enemy. They did not claim territory. They did not even demand payment. Instead, human engineers began helping our damaged cities. That confused the galaxy more than their weapons had. Council observers arrived within 2 days. Their vessels filled the orbital lanes, carrying diplomats, analysts, journalists, and military specialists. Everyone wanted to see the humans. Everyone wanted to understand what had happened. I watched the first council delegation land at Stonebridge. The same species that had refused our distress calls now offered condolences. One representative approached me. Commander Carter, the Council deeply regrets its inability to intervene. I looked at the ruins behind him. You had the ability. He lowered his head. We made a political decision. Yes, I said. You did. He had no answer. Later that day, I walked through the human command center. It looked nothing like the headquarters of a conquering army. There were no trophies, no captured flags, no celebrations. Maps covered the walls. Engineers repaired equipment. Medical teams treated Urini and human soldiers together. Captain Jake Miller stood beside a tactical display, reading reports. You could have destroyed the Krell fleet, I said. Yes, you could have followed them. Yes, you could have taken their territory. He finally looked at me. We didn't come here for territory. I studied him. Then why bring enough ships to defeat them? His answer was simple. Because we didn't know how many would be necessary. That sentence stayed with me. Humanity had not arrived with the smallest force capable of winning. They had arrived with enough force to make failure unlikely. That was when I began to understand the difference between courage and preparation. The galaxy had mistaken humanity's silence for weakness. It had mistaken their absence for decline. But Earth had not been waiting for another war. Earth had been preparing for the moment someone needed them. The Council soon announced that Valora would receive emergency reconstruction assistance. I rejected it. We would rebuild ourselves. But when Miller offered human engineering crews, I accepted. Not because we owed humanity anything. That debt had already changed hands. We had saved Earth 32 years ago. Now Earth had saved us. For the first time, we stood beside one another without either species standing above the other. We were equals. 3 weeks after the battle, I stood on the rebuilt eastern wall of Stonebridge and watched the last Krell prisoners leave Valora. They had expected execution. Instead, Captain Miller had insisted on following our laws. Every prisoner was disarmed, registered, and transported beyond the system under supervision. The humans did not interfere with our courts. They did not demand vengeance. They simply made certain the Krell could not return. That was the first lesson I learned about humanity. They could destroy an enemy. They simply preferred not to, unless necessary. The Galactic Council struggled with that distinction. Some representatives demanded that Earth explain its military strength. Others called for restrictions on human weapons and fleet construction. Miller refused every request. I attended the council session beside him. The speaker asked, Captain Miller, does humanity intend to pursue the Krell into Dominion territory? No. The answer came immediately. Then what prevents the Krell from attacking Valora again? We do. A murmur moved through the chamber. You intend to maintain a military presence here? Until Valora no longer requires it. The speaker hesitated. And after that, we leave. Several delegates exchanged confused looks. One finally asked the question everyone seemed afraid to voice. If humanity possesses this level of military power, why not use it to expand? Miller looked at him. Because that isn't why we built it. The chamber became silent. He continued. We built enough force to ensure that nobody could decide our survival for us. Then he looked toward me. Valora already understands that. I felt the weight of every eye in the chamber. I stood. Captain Miller. He turned. Why did you really come? He did not answer immediately. Instead, he reached inside his uniform and removed a small metal plate. It was old, scratched, darkened by age. He placed it on the table between us. I recognized the symbol immediately. The Valoran fleet crest. My breath stopped. This belonged to one of your ships, he said. I touched the plate carefully. Which one? VSS Resolute. I remembered it. The Resolute had been destroyed over Earth 32 years earlier. Miller looked at me. We kept the names. I stared at the plate. For the first time, I understood that humanity had not simply remembered Valora. They had preserved the debt. And now, they were finally ready to close it. 3 weeks after the battle, I stood on the rebuilt eastern wall of Stonebridge and watched the last Krell prisoners leave Valora. They had expected execution. Instead, Captain Miller had insisted on following our laws. Every prisoner was disarmed, registered, and transported beyond the system under supervision. The humans did not interfere with our courts. They did not demand vengeance. They simply made certain the Krell could not return. That was the first lesson I learned about humanity. They could destroy an enemy. They simply preferred not to, unless necessary. The Galactic Council struggled with that distinction. Some representatives demanded that Earth explain its military strength. Others called for restrictions on human weapons and fleet construction. Miller refused every request. I attended the council session beside him. The speaker asked, "Captain Miller, does humanity intend to pursue the Krell into Dominion territory?" "No." The answer came immediately. "Then what prevents the Krell from attacking Valora again?" "We do." A murmur moved through the chamber. "You intend to maintain a military presence here?" "Until Valora no longer requires it." The speaker hesitated. "And after that, we leave." Several delegates exchanged confused looks. One finally asked the question everyone seemed afraid to voice. If humanity possesses this level of military power, why not use it to expand? Miller looked at him. "Because that's why we built it." The chamber became silent. He continued, "We built enough force to ensure that nobody could decide our survival for us." Then he looked toward me. "Valora already understands that." I felt the weight of every eye in the chamber. I stood. "Captain Miller." He turned. "Why did you really come?" He did not answer immediately. Instead, he reached inside his uniform and removed a small metal plate. It was old, scratched, darkened by age. He placed it on the table between us. I recognized the symbol immediately. The Valoran fleet crest. My breath stopped. "This belonged to one of your ships," he said. I touched the plate carefully. "Which one?" "VSS Resolute." I remembered it. The Resolute had been destroyed over Earth 32 years earlier. Miller looked at me. "We kept the names." I stared at the plate. For the first time, I understood that humanity had not simply remembered Valora. They had preserved the debt. And now, they were finally ready to close it. I watched Jake Miller prepare to leave. Before he boarded his ship, I stopped him. "Captain." He turned. "Why did you wait 32 years? He looked toward the sky. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he reached into his uniform and removed a metal plate. It was covered with names. Valoran ships. Hundreds of them. The vessels that had died defending Earth. Miller held it carefully. "We weren't waiting," he said. "We were preparing." I looked at the human fleet above Valora. They had arrived as strangers. They were leaving as allies. "You protected Earth when everyone else turned away," Miller continued. "Now it was our turn." Then his ship disappeared into the sky. I remained beneath the memorial, holding the old list of names. For 32 years, I had believed Valora's debt was forgotten. I was wrong. Humanity had remembered everything, and somewhere beyond the stars, the galaxy was beginning to understand the truth. Earth had not disappeared. It had been preparing. And when the time came, humanity returned, not for conquest, not for glory, and not for territory. It returned because someone had once stood alone for Earth, and humanity never forgot who stood beside it.